Morning, everybody. Hope everybody having a great day. Doing a quick little live talking about how unhealed parents can unintentionally cause anxious attachment style in their children. So we've been doing a lot of lives talking about attachment styles on this channel. You got the secure attachment, you got the anxious attachment, you got the avoidant attachment. We did full live breakdowns on how and what is an anxious attachment style, how and what is an avoidant attachment style, how we get those different attachment styles, how they play out in our particular adult relationships. But today we're going to actually be discussing how an unhealed parent can unintentionally raise an anxious attachment style. How an unhealed parent can unintentionally raise their children to have anxious attachment styles, which is why we have to heal, because most of our attachment styles are actually formed in our formative years based upon our relationships with our parents, which is why it's important for us to actually heal as parents. If we have children, it's important for us to heal so we don't bleed on them, so we don't project our traumas onto them. And there is many ways that us being unhealed as parents can cause our children to have anxious attachment style. What up, Ty? Talking about how an unhealed parent can raise an anxious attachment style. Why are we up so early? I'm actually up way earlier than this, typically every day, but I wanted to do a live last night, fell asleep early, so I'm just banging it out before I got the gym at 8, then a client at 10. So I'm just trying to get this live in. But we're talking about how an unhealed parent can raise anxious attachment style in their children. And the first way that happens is inconsistent emotional availability. So with the anxious attachment style, how they typically get it is a lot of times parent being inconsistent. Sometimes the parent is present. Other times the parent is withdrawn and cold, thinking about life, thinking about other stuff that's going on. So it's hard for the parent to really be present. So a lot of people with anxious attachment style typically grow up being people pleasers because of the parent's inconsistency. Sometimes the parent was really tuned into that person's needs and was there. Other times the parent was just distracted with life or got other stuff going on. So they're just dealing with their own things. So they can't really be fully present with the child. They're physically present, but they're not emotionally and mentally present. So you said it keeps freezing? Let me try to turn my Wi-Fi off and see if this helps. All right, Ty, let me know if that's better. I turned my Wi-Fi off. Throw a comment in there if that is better. So yes, inconsistent emotional availability. Sometimes the parent is in tune and actually present, and other times the parent is not there at all, not in tune at all, not present at all. So the kid kind of grows up thinking that their emotional needs really aren't important, that everybody else's emotional needs, that everybody else's emotional needs around them is better. So the kid grows up feeling like that anybody around them that they like won't necessarily tune into their emotions, or that there'll be an emotional burden. And that stems from the parent being emotionally available inconsistently. So the fact that if you are an unhealed parent and you struggle with emotional availability with your children, know that could be you actually instilling in them an anxious attachment style, which is they're always going to crave intimacy. They're never going to feel comfortable being by themselves. They're going to have low self-worth. They're always going to need reassurance because they're never going to feel good by themselves and all that. So as a parent, you want to be mindful that the number one way in which they get that is through being inconsistent with your emotional availability. So, and again, sometimes it's hard because life be lifing, and your kid's always trying to dang near demand your attention. And you got stuff going on. You thinking about work. You thinking about bills. You might be thinking about, your own personal relationship. And your kid is demanding your attention because they have emotional needs. And if you don't have the emotional availability to be in tune when your child really needs it. We're not talking about overdoing it with your child or meshing with your child. We're talking about like when they really need it, when they feel like that their nervous system is really dysregulated and they really need to hear you. They really need love. They really need affection. And you're inconsistent with that. That's the number one way in which an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their particular child. And you'll know you're doing this if your child has a heightened sensitivity to your particular moods, where they're just almost hyper vigilant in the sense, or they got to guard, they got to be mindful of like, all right, is mom and dad, what mood are they in today? Are they going to be in tune, or are they going to be completely withdrawn from me? Are they going to, celebrate me and know what I'm doing, or are they just not even going to be interested at all because they're distracted with what they got going on? That really makes a child crave the need to be loved and that attention. And that's why a person with an anxious attachment style, when they get older and they don't feel good about themselves, they go to a relationship that's outside of their family, outside of their home. Secure attachment style people tend to go just home when they don't feel good, or when they don't feel safe, or when they feel emotionally dysregulated. But an anxious attachment style, because they didn't have that safe place at home, because their parents wasn't emotionally available, most likely, they tend to run outside of the family. They tend to run to a person, a place, a substance to actually help regulate themselves. So we want to be mindful of that. The next way in which an unhealed parent can unintentionally cause anxious attachment style in their child is overprotective. Being overprotective. And this can stem from constantly projecting your own fears, your own worries onto your child. And it causes you to keep them very close. So let's just say something happened to you as a child. And I know I experienced this. I was molested around a friend of a family, a female friend of the family. And for me, that caused me to be extremely overprotective of my child. I wasn't leaving my son around nobody that wasn't my mom. And that's including my brother. And my brother ain't never even did nothing with no kids, but that's how overprotective I was. And I had to learn to check that, bro. You speaking a lot of things I'm going through. I appreciate that. I had to learn to check myself, because I'm pushing my wounds onto my son. I got to be mindful of that. Now, does that mean I just leave my son around anybody? Absolutely not. But what it is saying is I had to learn that overprotective thing was really stemming from my wounds. And if that wasn't careful, that will cause my son to cling to me unnecessarily when he gets older, because I'm always being overprotective in his youth. And that's stemming from a wounded place within me. It's not stemming from really me needing to protect my son. It's more so, do you go for psychology? Yes, I went to school for psychology, but most of what I know I learned outside of school. Psychology is just how you thinking everybody got disorders and wrong, and you know what I'm saying? But they ain't gonna teach you how to fix nobody. They'll teach you how to label people and prescribe things to people, but they ain't gonna teach you how to fix nothing or create transformation or change with people. So I did go to school for psychology, but that was over 10 years ago, and I've been doing self-study with things that actually produce change outside of school. But yes, I did go to school for psychology. So yes, that overprotectiveness was a wound within me that I had to address, and it caused me to be overprotective with my son, not having him around anybody, not being alone with anybody. And again, all of that will cause him later on in life to cling to me, which will be an anxious attachment style, not feeling good by himself, feeling like he can't trust people, and all of feeling like you're waiting on the other shoe to drop, like you just know this person's going to do something wrong to you. And that will be me projecting all of that into my son's nervous system. So I got to be mindful of that. Damn, bro, it's too early. You hit me deep. No diddy. That's funny. No diddy. So we got to be mindful of that. And that overprotectiveness can really cause a child to develop an intense sense of dependency on me. Which again, that's an anxious attachment style. Anxious attachment style people are not comfortable by themselves. They always need to be in a relationship. That's how you know if somebody, it don't even just got to be you. That's how you know anybody has an anxious attachment style. They're never comfortable single. They always need to be in a relationship. They always need to be entertaining somebody. Because when they get by themselves, that's when them thoughts and them reminders that they're not good, they're low self-worth, all of that stuff kicks in. So, and remember, they had inconsistent parents, so their parents wasn't in tune with them to pour into them. So when they stop feeling good about themselves, they want to run to another relationship. That's why anxious attachment style are always in different relationships. They are never single because they don't feel good about themselves single. And they don't have good internal dialogue and a good self-image. So by themselves, they're just run on negative thought patterns on why people don't like them, why everybody will abandon them, why they're the reason why the relationship didn't work out, all of these different negative thoughts. The anxious attachment style will always put the onus on themselves and rarely on the people that's actually doing stuff. And then is, nah, for real, I'm learning because I'm going through these things. I'm a single dad. I'm overprotective, yes, and I'm trying to learn, but it is hard. It is hard, man, especially when you have your own unresolved wounds. That's why it's so important for you to actually do the work and heal. You should actually click the link in my bio and schedule a free healing discovery call, man. We could actually talk about your situation a little bit more. So the third way that an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child, the third way that avoided or that an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child is unpredictable affection. Unpredictable affection. So sometimes you were in tune with your parents, and other times your parents wasn't. They was, again, distracted. They was thinking about something that was going on. They're thinking about their own relationship problems. They're just all in their head. They're physically there but not presently there. So because you didn't consistently get the affection that you need, the attention that you need, a lot of times you don't trust that you will get it from that particular source. That's why, again, a lot of these signs you see kind of weave together, where the anxious attachment style always goes outside of themselves to get reassured because they don't get it at home, because the parent was emotionally unavailable and the parent is unpredictable with their affection. So it's not like with a secure attachment style. With a secure attachment style, when you needed really affection as a kid, your parents gave it to you. They were there and they were in tune emotionally to be able to give that to you. But with the anxious attachment style, it was unpredictable because you have, typically we get the anxious or avoidant attachment style through unhealed parents, because that's how we form our attachment styles. And it takes a healed person, a person with a level of emotional intelligence, to really be able to be in tune with your child and be able to acquiesce to their emotional needs when they need it. Again, not overflowing, not overboarding, but when your kids really, really need it, to be able to be in tune. That's how kids and people just form secure attachment styles. But most of us didn't necessarily get that. So with the anxious attachment styles, a lot of times we get it through unpredictable affection through parents, because a lot of parents haven't healed themselves. So they're not emotionally available. They're not cool with affection. They're not comfortable with affection. They're not sometimes, and I'm so grateful for my mentor, Mr. Lake, that way in my 20s, he taught me to be comfortable with male affection. Because I remember when I first met him and he hugged me, I was like, man, are you gay or something? And he was just like, why do you think that a man hugging another man is gay? Like, your dad never hugged you? And I was just like, realistically, no. Like, that ain't some shit we did. You know what I'm saying? Hug me, kiss me on my cheek, tell me he loved me and all this other, you know what I'm saying? If I'm sad or something like that, be able to consult. Like, no, I didn't grow up around men doing that. You know what I'm saying? My dad would think some shit like that is gay, to be 100% honest. And through having other mentors that were okay with male affection, it taught me to be okay with it. And I transferred that to my dad. Now, again, it ain't just like it happened in one conversation. I started doing this with my dad in my 20s, and now I'm about to be 36 in December. So now me and my dad can hug. We can tell each other we love each other. We can kiss each other on the cheek. But it did not start out like that, because my dad was very unpredictable with the affection. But now I'm able to be really predictable with my affection to my son. I'm able to hug my son. I'm able to let him just lay on my chest. I'm able to kiss him on his forehead, kiss him on his cheek. I'm able to just rub his back and rub his head. And that, all them forms of affection I didn't receive from my father. Didn't receive a lot of that from my mother either. My mom's not really more of an affection type of person, but didn't really receive that. I had to learn that. And so that is how an unhealed parent can unintentionally cause an anxious attachment style in their kid, is by not giving the affection, because it makes them feel weird, because the unhealed parent ain't comfortable giving affection. The unhealed parent ain't comfortable receiving affection. Most of the time, because of their own wounds that they haven't dealt with, that they are refusing to deal with. And unfortunately, now the kid has to suffer as a result of it. And now this kid grows up with the same issues that the parent did. That's why kids don't become what we instruct, they become what we demonstrate. That's why it's so important for us to heal, because they're just modeling our nervous system. So people be like, oh, if I'm not doing this in front of my kid, then I'm not demonstrating it for them. You're demonstrating your nervous system. So just because you're suppressing something in your nervous system from your kid, know that your whole nervous system is going over into your child. So they'll be older and they'll start suppressing the same things, and they don't even know why they're doing it. They'll have a predisposition to do certain tendencies, and they'll be like, I don't even know where this is coming from. But it came from them actually modeling their parents, and their parents just making it seem like they were hiding it from the kid. But kids see everything. Kids are great observers, but terrible interpreters. So they're going to see it, but the meaning that they're put to it a lot of times is going to be very limiting to them, which is why a lot of people grow up with low self-esteem, negative self-image, low self-worth, because a lot of things that they observed and the meanings that they put to them about themselves Oh, the reason why, mom isn't in tune with me is because I'm not good enough. The reason why mom can't come to my games is because I'm not good enough. The reason why mom and dad separated is because of me. The reason why we're getting evicted is because of me. And kids start developing these very limiting beliefs. And because kids are to be seen and not heard, those thoughts never get challenged. So those limiting beliefs grow stronger and stronger and stronger until those kids become adults. And now they're an adult, 30, 40, 50 years old, and now they come see me. But those limiting beliefs have been causing damage on their lives since they were a kid all through their adult life. That's why we must heal as parents, because unintentionally we end up pushing that onto our child. What up, Thunder? Trained athlete, ain't seen you in a while, man. Hope everything's good with your trainings. He's an Ironman person that I met in the gym a while back, but I'm always fascinated with Ironman people because that takes a certain mindset for sure. Projecting our fears of abandonment onto our kids. That is the fourth way in which an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style into their child, where you as the parent have the fear of abandonment because of your own unresolved wounds, because maybe your parent abandoned you, or maybe you went through a divorce, or maybe your parent died, or some type of situation that got you fearing that people will leave you. Now you projecting that onto your child. And now you just cause your child to have those same beliefs, to have those same feelings. And that's one of the main things that drives the anxious attachment style is the fear that they will be rejected, the fear that they will be abandoned. And so an unhealed parent can unintentionally cause that into their child by constantly projecting it, by constantly just always reinforcing that around the child. Most of our beliefs come from three things: authoritative source, intensity, and repetition. So if your parents is constantly saying, well, people will leave you, people will just abandon you, people will just leave you, so it's coming from an authoritative source, somebody you respect, your parent. Then it's intensity. So a lot of times when parents be saying stuff, they're not just saying it in a way that's not convincing. They're saying it with intense, like with their chest, like they really, really mean it. Then the repetition of it. So if it's something that they're saying constantly to you over and over and over, every week, every day, every month, throughout your whole life, those things get adopted into your belief system. Then there's this thing called echolalia, which is basically words and phrases that's constantly repeated from the outside will eventually get adopted into your belief system, even if you got evidence to prove that that's not true. Words and phrases that's constantly repeated from the outside will get adopted into your belief system, even if you got evidence to prove it's not true. Case in point, the news will constantly flash murders and robberies. So therefore, people got this fear and this belief that, oh my God, the chances of me dying from a murder or a robbery is just so high and all that. But when you look at the statistics of it, it's like less than 3% of the people that die from that. But because they constantly just show it to us, it bypasses the evidence that we know to be true, and it gets into our nervous system. And we really fear that. People fear dying from a gun. People fear dying from this. It's like the chances of that, where you got a better chance of dying from what you eat, which they not putting out in the news. You got a better chance of dying from what you're smoking, what you're drinking, who you having sex with, a car accident, all of these other things, but they're very lucrative. So they don't want to put negative associations to those things. So they want to keep you in fear. So they associate it to things that have a very low probability of death, which is homicide. But if you look state to state to state, what is the leading causes of death? Homicide ain't even in the top 5 in no state. Again, it's diabetes, heart attacks, a lot of stuff from lifestyle and what we induce. But my point in saying that is that words and phrases that's constantly repeated from the outside will get adopted into your belief system, even if you got evidence to prove that it is not true. So if your parent is constantly, people gonna leave you, constantly spewing out their fear of abandonment onto you, eventually it will get adopted into your child's belief system, and they will have that fear of abandonment that didn't come from nobody abandoning them. That came from their unhealed parent who got abandonment issues, projecting those wounds onto their child. So if you are a parent and you have children, you got to be mindful that you being unhealed and you not wanting to do your work is damaging your child. Because if you got the fear of abandonment, you're projecting that onto your child. And next thing you know, your child will always grow with this fear that people will reject them, people won't like them, and people will abandon them, which will ruin their relationships. So be mindful of that. We got to heal. We got to address that. Emotional neglect. Whew. Man, when you are an unhealed parent and you are not emotionally present, you could emotionally neglect your kids. And when you are emotionally neglectful, that is one of the main ways that you create an anxious attachment style in your kid, being emotionally neglectful. You create an anxious or an avoidant attachment style in your kid. In this one, it depends on the interpretation of your emotional neglect by the child. Because if your kid interprets the emotional neglect like, I'm not about to rely on nobody, that's more so tilts you into the avoidant category. But if the kid's interpretation of the emotional neglect, the emotional neglect by the parent is that they are not good enough, they're not worthy, something is wrong with them, then that will tilt them more towards the anxious. So if you are neglecting your child emotionally, that is a clear sign that they're going to have some type of attachment issue, whether it's avoidant or whether it's anxious. They will not have the secure attachment style. And it's hard for a child, or it's hard for a parent who is emotionally unavailable to not neglect their child emotionally. Because parents, especially a lot of parents, think, oh, well, food, clothing, and shelter. I birthed you, I gave you clothes, I gave you food, and I provide you shelter. I did my job. And it's just like, I guess, but it's like the kid didn't ask to be here. So in one instance, just saying that you protect the shell of the child, I guess if you want to get a badge or a participation trophy, I guess you get that. But in actuality, protecting your whole child is also protecting what's going on inside of them. But most of them don't have emotional intelligence. Most of them didn't have emotional awareness. And we got to think about it. We're just now coming into a space where it's okay to even talk about what's going on in your mind. Just 10 years ago, dang, or really 15 years ago, 20 years ago for sure, if you had a therapist or a psychologist or something like that, it was because you were crazy. It was because something was actually wrong with you. So our generation is actually blessed in a sense that we're not crazy for going to therapy. We're not crazy for having a psychologist. We're not crazy for saying that mental health wise, we're not okay. But the older generations didn't have that luxury. So again, it's not about fault. It's just about responsibility. So the fact that you are emotionally unavailable may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to become emotionally available so you don't transfer that over to your kids. Oh, well, I just grew up in an environment where my parents just did that. Well, you're going to create an environment where your kids just do that if you don't get a hold of that. At some point in time, the buck going to have to stop with you if you want it to. So we're talking about ways that an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child, and emotional neglect is definitely one of them. Because again, the emotional neglect can cause them to start feeling like they're not good enough, cause them to start having a negative image of themselves, which will precipitate negative self-talk, negative dialogue, which will be the driving force of them always feeling like they need to be with somebody. And then when they need to be with somebody, they will always feel like they need the person to reassure them, to tell them that they're okay, to tell them that they're valuable, to tell them that they're worthy, because innately they don't feel it within themselves. And a lot of that comes from when they were younger, they were emotionally neglected, because if they really were worth something, if they really were valuable, they wouldn't have been neglected. Their parents would have been in tune. So it causes your child to actually grow up looking for people that would emotionally neglect them. That is the archetype you're building for them in regards to love. So that is what they will think is supposed to happen. My needs aren't supposed to be met. So your child probably emotionally suppress, have a whole bunch of blow-ups, be angry and all these other things, because they would fear that if I was to expose myself to this person emotionally, I would get rejected or I would get abandoned. Real talk, I'm very independent because I was shown that asking for help makes you weak and a burden. And if you are not careful, I don't know if you have kids, but if you're not careful, you'll raise kids with the exact same thing. Feeling like there's something wrong with them for asking for help. What up, Mel? Feeling like something's wrong with you for actually asking for help. In actuality, that's not the case. Everybody needs help. Every human, every man needs help. But a lot of us are conditioned to be damn near avoidant attachment style, which is I value my independence over a relationship. I'm not about to ask for help because that makes me less than a man. That means that I'm not good enough. That means that somebody's going to look down as I'm less than because I need help. And then what you do is you train your child to be the same way. This is why in the Bible it says, train a child in the way that they should go. And when they're older, they're not departing. The issue is that most parents are unintentionally training their child to be anxious or avoidant, training their child to not rely on people. And it's not intentional. Because again, most parents are not intentionally emotionally unavailable. It's just that they don't do the work. They haven't done the work. They haven't healed. We're taught to just put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And that's not really how things go. It's like we got all this unresolved pain. We got all this unresolved trauma. But we taught you just got to push forward. You just got to keep going. And that's what parents is trying to do. Because it's like most parents are not financially set, so it's like they don't got time to just sit and analyze their problems. They got to keep going. I don't have kids, probably because of this train of thought. What up, Scott? That could be. From what you're sounding, it sounds like you're anxious. So let me know in the comments. Do you value your independence over relationships? And when emotions get too high with a person, if you find yourself really, really liking a person, do you tend to want to flee from that particular relationship or lean in? From what you're saying, I think you particularly want to flee. You may ghost people as well, too, when things seem like they're going really, really well. Let me know in the comments if my inference about what you're saying is correct. But we're talking about ways that an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child. Using emotional manipulation. What up, Jill? Using emotional manipulation. We're talking about ways that an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child. So when a parent uses emotional manipulation on a child, whether they're guilt tripping, whether they use shaming tactics, whether they're always insulting, whether they're always trying to coerce their child through some type of emotional manipulation, that could be a clear way that a person develops an anxious attachment style. Because remember, an anxious attachment style is really anxious or avoidant. You don't really feel safe in home. Wow. Quite accurate in the estimation. You don't really feel safe at home, so it causes you to want to move to something else. So this is, again, why people with anxious attachment style, when they don't feel good about themselves, they don't go home to their family. They go to another person. They go to a man. They go to a woman. They go to a substance. They go to something else outside of them to make them feel good about themselves because their parents didn't make them feel good. So emotional manipulation, if you're always guilt tripping, attacking your kids, doing all these things, that can cause your child to have anxious attachment style, which is, again, always running outside of themselves to feel good, always running outside of themselves for validation, running outside of themselves to feel like they are important. That's why we got to be mindful as parents. Where are our blind spots that we need to heal? Where are our blind spots? And really, if you got a kid, if you're present in your kid's life, that should just be so easy because kids reveal to you your blind spot so quick. When do you get frustrated? When do you get thrown off your rocker? When do you get all of those? To me, triggers are mirrors or reflectors that let you know where you're not healed at. Why does that throw you off the rocker? Why does that actually dysregulate you? That's what you have to heal, because otherwise what isn't transformed within you will be transferred to your children. And next thing you know, your children start displaying the exact same tendencies. So now your child is attracting somebody, because again, anxious people, it's rare that they attract a secure attachment style. A secure attachment style can deal with an anxious or avoidant person. But again, most parents don't raise securely attached people. Most of them are raised unintentionally, either avoided or anxious. Now, secure can deal with anybody, but an anxious person a lot of times attracts an avoidant. And an avoidant will use a lot of that emotional manipulation on that particular person. So you're almost training the child in the way that they should go, and when they older, they won't depart. So if you're always emotionally manipulating your child, you're create an environment where they will think that that is what's supposed to happen to them. So you'll notice in their adult relationships as they get older in life, they'll attract people that do that to them, which is why you have to heal. Very important. I appreciate it. Hi. Hey, what up, what up, what up? Peace and blessings. That's true. Thank you, thank you. So we're talking about, thanks so much for this, bro. I'm interested. Definitely, definitely. If this is resonating with anybody, click the link in my bio and schedule a free healing discovery call. And we can talk about your case specifically, and we can do it privately. So overreaction to conflict or stress. That is a way in which an unhealed parent can cause anxious attachment style in their child. If you're always overreacting to stress, if you're always overreacting to conflict, because one of the main signs that a person has an anxious attachment style is that they don't want to deal with conflict. Again, anxious attachment style are really insecure relationships because they don't be themselves. They're never honest about what they're dealing with because, again, their parents never cater to their emotional needs, so they don't bring their emotional needs to their relationship. They feel their emotional needs are going to get ignored. They feel like that will lead to them being rejected. They feel like that will lead to them being abandoned. Like, they don't want to have conflict. So if a person is doing something that doesn't please them, they're not going to say anything because they fear being rejected. They fear being let go of. They fear this person leaving. So I'm just going to stay in this particular situation. And remember, it's mostly driven by them having a negative self-image of themselves and low self-worth. So that causes them to just be in situations that people really don't got the best interest for them, where they really are just tortured almost in a sense, where their emotional needs are completely ignored. But that's stemming from raise the child in the way that they should go, and when they get older, they won't depart, which is why as a parent, you got to do the work. Because if you are, because of your own wounds, constantly overreacting to conflict, it makes your child want to stay away from it. Our nervous systems are always either moving towards something or moving away from something. And it literally only takes one intense negative experience as a child to make your nervous system want to be like, I'm cool off of that. So, and you'll notice with certain people, when an argument happens, you got certain people that's more volatile and they'll move towards it and be aggressive. And you got more people that's withdrawn and they'll shut down and I don't want to deal with that. If you do investigation, you'll realize that an imprint happened, and that's where the actual first impression happened into your nervous system. That will let you know why you either move away in conflict or you move towards. If you grew up in a household and it was conflict led to violence and all this aggression and all, a lot of times either you move towards or you didn't modeled it and you are aggressive. This is why we say our childhood solutions become our adulthood problems. Because if you grew up in that type of environment, you got to model that in order to be safe. Otherwise, you will be ripped to shreds emotionally if you didn't develop those aggressive tendencies. But while it was a solution in your childhood, it becomes a problem in your adulthood because now you're not in that aggressive environment, but you're still bringing those aggressive tendencies to your new environment. So people be like, bro, you're a little aggressive. Yo, you a little too intense. Yo, you don't think you went a little overboard with all that? And in your mind, you're just like, no, I just was talking. I didn't think I was, but you're comparing it to your environment that you grew up around where everybody was rah-rah. Everybody else didn't grow up around that. So their reference point to you being all intense, they're like, this nigga's pretty intense. But in your mind, you're like, because you're comparing it to your dad, you're comparing it to your mom, you're comparing it to the people you grew up around. You're like, me intense? But you're got a different reference point in your mind. So if you're always overreacting to conflict, you can instill fear of conflict in your child, which will cause them to settle a lot of times in relationships. It will cause them to fear speaking their truth, fear holding people accountable, fear having difficult conversations. And any of us in here that got long-term relationships, we know that you need to have all those things to have a successful long-term relationship. You got to be able to hold people accountable. You got to be able to have difficult conversations. But they fear that if we have a conflict, you're going to reject me, you're going to abandon me. And again, most of that stems from them not feeling good about themselves. And a lot of that stems from an unhealed parent that don't know how to affirm, that don't know how to give affection, that don't know how to speak life into their child, that don't know how to be emotionally present. And so that's how the child unintentionally develops the anxious attachment style. Inconsistent in boundaries. Inconsistent in boundaries. So sometimes, let's just say a parent is super strict, and then other times a parent is like overly lenient. A lot of times that can cause an anxious attachment style. It's the inconsistency of not really knowing what to do to get love, what to do to really get praise. You do some things sometimes, and it's like your parents just praise you for it. You do the exact same thing another time, and it's like they didn't even notice. They were withdrawn. Sometimes they did something, you got so in trouble. Other times you did the exact same thing, and they didn't even say nothing to you. You have a lot more to learn. Can you give context to that particular statement? But yes, so just being hot and cold, being inconsistent with the particular boundaries, that can cause a child to have anxious attachment style. So we just want to be mindful. And again, most of the time people are inconsistent because of what's going on inside of their psychology. They're inconsistent because of what's going on within them. Because the parent be life, and they got their own relationships to deal with. They got financial problems to deal with. Then they trying to tune into their kids and all that stuff like that. Then they got their own just personal relationships. So sometimes I understand. I'm a parent. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand that it can be difficult to be consistent in a lot of these things. But it's worth it, because the downside of not doing it, the damage of not doing it, can cause you a lot of repair, where your child, again, is constantly in abusive relationships, constantly in emotionally neglectful relationships, constantly in relationships where they feel like they're trying to prove themselves to this particular person. And you might be like, why are you tolerating this? Why are you dealing with this? Why would you even accept that type of behavior? But it's in them. Most of our attachment styles, honestly, are formed when we are very, very young, typically before the age of 7. So that's why a lot of times you got to go back in time to really make sense out of your attachment style with your relationship with your parents. Sometimes we try to understand our parents as they are now, and that's what causes the confusion. You got to go back to what your parents were like when you were like 0 to 7, and that is what will give you a lot of insight into your attachment style, and to really just a lot of your tendencies of you're just like, I don't really know why I react this way. I don't really know why that's my impulse or why that's my... Go back to when you were 0 to 7 and look at all your influences, and I guarantee you find the imprint there. Somebody. Another way in which a parent unintentionally, unhealed parent unintentionally causes anxious attachment style in their child is excessive dependence on the child for emotional support. Excessive dependence on the child for emotional support. So if you're always needing your child to build you up, to fill you up, to tell you you're pretty, to tell you you're doing a good job, to tell you you're good, to tell you you're worthy, that will start to cause the child to feel like that is necessary. You got to overdo it. You got to overload. And that will cause a person to feel like they need it. So then your child is in a relationship where they constantly feel like their partner has to do it. And if their partner don't always do it, then they're going to feel like the partner doesn't love them and the partner isn't really into them and all that. But you train the child in the way that they should go. And now that they got older, they won't depart. So if you're training them by, oh, you got to just excessively just support me emotionally. You always got to be in tune with me. You always have to just be there when I need you. Oh my God, you're not answering the phone for me. I needed to talk to you. I needed you for this. And that will get transferred to your child. And now your child will, again, always demand that their partner be there for their emotional needs. Always demand it, always demand it, always demand it. And that will become draining to people after a while. People, either you're a fountain or either you're a drain. You don't want to be a drain to people. You want to be something that actually gives life to people. But after a while, if you're just always just demanding emotional support from people, but you're never giving it, but you're just always demanding it, people will just, back to the nervous system, wanting to move away. People ain't going to want to be around you after a while, and you're going to damage your child, because again, you're going to cause your child to... Kids don't become what we instruct, they become what we demonstrate. So if you're constantly demonstrating being dependent over your child for their emotional support in you, that's what you're going to create in your child. Or either your child is going to be dependent on other people, or they're going to be the other way around, where they're always just going to trying to just support other people. They're going to be the ones that's fixing broken people. How many of us have experienced that? We always seem to find people that are broken so we can fix them. Where does that come from? A lot of times it's this. It's being modeled of like we had to be emotional support for the people that were caregiving us. So now we feel almost responsible for healing people. We feel almost responsible for fixing people. And you don't want your child to be in a relationship where they feel like they have to fix their particular partner, because that's none of our jobs to actually fix our own partner. Happiness is actually an inside job. And then if you just got fear of your child's independence, that's a clear way that you're going to create anxious attachment style in your particular child. So we just want to be mindful of any of these signs. If any of these things resonated with you, if you have an anxious attachment style yourself, and you want to address that so you don't end up creating kids with anxious attachment styles. Or if you got an avoidant attachment style, you don't want to create kids with an avoidant attachment style. Or you're just unhealed, period. You got all this unresolved trauma, and some of these things resonated with you, and you don't want to create an anxious or an avoidant attachment style in your child. Then definitely click the link in my bio, schedule a free healing discovery call, and we can kind of talk about your situation personally. But I got a client at 10. I got to hit the gym real quick so I can get time to get my workout in and get back home before my client. And I think me and Dr. Joe going live at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'm not sure. He might have had to switch things up. But if not, then I will be live on Wednesday. And I'm going to talk about ways that an unhealed parent causes avoided attachment style. So y'all tune into that. I appreciate you, Mel. Hey, hit my line, bro. Peace.